Hello, my name is Egon Cholakian. Humanity is entering a new phase of heightened seismic activity. This is the era of catastrophic earthquakes, events we can regrettably no longer avert. This is not speculation, nor is it alarmism. It is a conclusion drawn from observable trends in Earth's geodynamics, which can no longer be ignored. We are on the threshold of large-scale tectonic shifts on our planet. Today, I will share with you the geological processes that have already been set in motion and what they will inevitably lead to in near future. But this is not only about forecast. We will also explain practical solutions that even today can help mitigate the escalation of natural disasters. In particular, I will speak about the unique technologies developed by the scientific community of ALLATRA. I will highlight the physical principles underpinning these technologies, specifically the equipment designed to restrain catastrophic events. I will explain the role this technology has played in stabilizing the current climate geodynamic situation, and most importantly, speak about those whose efforts made its creation possible. In today's video, I would like to discuss in more detail the scientific achievements of an individual responsible for several breakthrough technologies that are already benefiting humanity. I believe the world must know its heroes. Most importantly, today we are talking about lives. Lives already lost and those that can still be saved, your life and the lives of your loved ones. Every word I speak today concerns you personally and your future. That is why I ask that you listen to me with special attention. I understand that we live in an era where our focus is splintered by fleeting videos and ever-changing images. But what I want to share with you cannot be grasped in passing. It requires reflection, analysis, and deep understanding. Set aside the habit of consuming information in short bursts. The subject I raise in this address is so critical that each of you must give it your time. I believe that among us are still many who are ready not only to watch and listen, but to think, comprehend, and share this knowledge with others. This is especially important now, as time for contemplation is running out, catastrophically so. Today, I want to once again raise the issue of increasing frequency and intensity of earthquakes. Why do I consider this one of the most urgent issues of our time? Because we are on the verge of enormous catastrophes. My primary goal today is to reach those of sound mind in the hope that humanity will suffer as little as possible. It is essentially to understand that the earthquakes occurring today are incomparable in their danger to any that have taken place in the history of our civilization. Previously, major seismic events were isolated. Today, however, we are witnessing a clearly defined trend of exponential growth. Nearly 6 months ago, at the United Nations Biodiversity Conference, COP16 in Colombia, I spoke openly about this alarming trend. Even then, in October 2024, I pointed out that daily occurrences of magnitude 5.0 earthquakes had become commonplace. For the past 6 months, there has been a steady increase in earthquakes of magnitude 6.0 and above. And another 6 months have now passed. You can confirm the increase in magnitude 6.0 plus earthquakes yourself. Simply install a seismic monitoring app on your phone and check it regularly. You will see that earthquakes above magnitude 6.0 now occur every other day. Seismic services are too slow in aggregating annual global data, so your own observations may prove even more telling. The rise in seismic activity is also clearly reflected in publicly available data. Consider, for example, the global seismic activity level developed by geologist and volcanologist Tom Pfeiffer for volcano discovery. This tool shows how actively earthquakes are occurring worldwide. Each bar on the chart represents the total seismic energy released on a given day, a combined daily magnitude. The taller the bar, the greater the energy released by all earthquakes on that day. Note how the colors of the bars change. They indicate different levels of activity on different days. Gray bars correspond to a combined daily magnitude of 5.2 through 5.8, representing moderate seismic energy. Green bars indicate 5.8 through 6.4, significant seismic energy. Yellow represents 6.4 through 7.0 and stronger earthquakes. Red above 7.0, very powerful events. Currently, the screen shows data from several years, 2017, 2024, and 2025. You can observe that in 2017, on the lower chart, gray bars, days with moderate seismic energy were frequent. Then in 2024, these became less common, replaced increasingly by green bars, days with significant seismic energy. Now look at the period from the late December 2024 to the present. You will see that gray bars have nearly vanished, replaced by an unbroken wall of green. The consistent decline of gray and rise of green bars signals a daily increase in the frequency of serious earthquakes. This is precisely the rise in magnitude 6.0 plus earthquakes I am referring to. Earthquakes, like other physical phenomena, are now intensifying in abrupt surges. This is a logical outcome, as discharge within Earth's interior follows its own cycles. Periods of rising and falling seismic activity persist, but the intervals between surges are shrinking. In a moment, I will explain the cause behind this pattern. First, let me remind you what an earthquake of magnitude 6.0 to 6.4 entails. Such events primarily devastate old and weak buildings, structures made of adobe or brick, not designed to withstand seismic stress. These buildings often collapse entirely, reduced to piles of rubble. Even stronger buildings develop cracks and experience partial failures in roofs, balconies, and load-bearing walls. Historic city centers with aging infrastructure suffer particularly severe damage. Infrastructure is also heavily impacted. Roads and bridges crack. Landslides in mountainous regions cut off transportation routes. Communication systems, electrical grids, water pipes, and gas lines are disrupted, leaving populations without essential services. Damage to hospitals, schools, and government buildings complicates aid delivery, turning local disasters into large-scale crises. Fatalities most often result from collapsing buildings or falling structural elements. Secondary threats exacerbate the situation. Fires sparked by ruptured gas lines or electrical short circuits spread rapidly in shattered infrastructure. Such earthquakes now occur every other day. This is our new reality. Thousands, tens of thousands of lives, rich and poor alike, have been lost. These were people who just yesterday were making plans for their futures, unaware of the threat that would so abruptly end their lives. Look at these images. Perhaps they will help you grasp even the fraction of the tragedy that now unfolds on a regular basis. The consistent increase in magnitude 6.0 plus earthquakes is an ominous sign. Their destructive force is not the only cause for concern. What troubles me even more is that we are approaching a critical threshold. Our next threshold is the increased frequency of magnitude 7.0 earthquakes. Once such events begin occurring on a regular basis, just as magnitude 6.0 earthquakes already do, there will be nothing left to change. And what could we have done? That is the question. The release of pressure in Earth's interior through the degassing of the Siberian magma plume, which I have discussed extensively in my previous addresses, may become a futile measure if we wait until earthquakes of magnitude 7.0 become frequent. The seismic activity chart is now our countdown, marking the days remaining before the point of no return. How much time is left? 5 years ago, magnitude 5.0 earthquakes began to rise steadily, occurring within the span of a week. Today, we are already seeing consistent events exceeding magnitude 6.0. The math is simple. The previous phase of seismic escalation unfolded in a relatively short time. Clearly, when calculating the time we have left before crossing the threshold, we must account for the exponential acceleration of earthquake frequency. Look at the chart showing the number of earthquakes with a magnitude of 5.0 and above by year, based on data from the International Seismological Center, ISC. Do you see that clear exponential curve? It is important to emphasize that the increase in magnitude 5.0 plus earthquakes is not the result of expanded sensor networks or heightened detector sensitivity. It genuinely reflects a shift in Earth's geodynamic behavior. Now, take a look at the chart showing the number of earthquakes with a magnitude of 7.0 and above, using data from the same ISC database. Do you see how both charts reflect a synchronous rise in the number of earthquakes? This trend indicates that within just 4 years, we may begin seeing earthquakes every 2 to 3 days across the globe, each comparable in magnitude to the devastating events in Turkey or Myanmar. Given the accelerating frequency and intensity of these earthquakes, this disaster will soon reach every one of us, including you, your family, and your loved ones. At any moment, even now as you watch this video, this tragedy could strike you or me. This is the reality we now live in. Some believe I am trying to instill fear, but I am the first person who would prefer this forecast never to come true. Unfortunately, however, this projection formulated many years ago by the scientific team of ALLATRA is being confirmed with the precision of a Swiss watch. And why is this forecast so accurate? It is based on a comprehensive geodynamic model that incorporates virtually every possible factor. For those who may have missed my earlier addresses, I will once again explain the causes behind what is exactly happening. The underlying cause of the increasing number of cataclysms on our planet is an astronomical cycle driven by external cosmic influence that affects not only Earth's core, but also the cores of other planets in the solar system. This external influence, in essence, serves as an additional energy input that intensely heats the core, accelerates mantle melting, and leads to the upward movement of molten magma toward the surface. This initiates a chain reaction. Internal heating intensifies, volcanic and seismic activity increases, and natural disasters begin to escalate across the globe. Historical records from geological strata and ice cores indicate that Earth has encountered similar catastrophic cycles every 12,000 years. Every second cycle, roughly every 24,000 years, ushers in even more severe planetary cataclysms. Earth is now entering precisely such an intensified cycle. Exacerbating the situation is ocean pollution by nano and microplastics, which impairs the ocean's ability to dissipate heat from lithospheric plates, plates that are overheating due to the rising magma beneath them. At this moment, I would like to highlight one important point. Our blue sphere does not simply hang suspended in space. It rotates on its axis. At the equator, Earth's rotational speed is approximately 465 meters per second, that is 1,525 feet per second. It is well known that in recent years, the Earth's rotational speed has been increasing in an enormous manner. In fact, to compensate for this effect, 1 second will need to be subtracted from global timekeeping by the end of year 2028. These changes in Earth's rotation occur over mere milliseconds, and some specialists believe there is nothing alarming about this. Unfortunately, this is a serious misconception. When we consider the mass of Earth, even a change of just a few milliseconds plays a critical role in global processes. Imagine a bus full of people driving downhill toward a concrete wall. If it's moving at 3 kilometers per hour, about 2 miles per hour, what will happen? Perhaps it will simply slow to a stop, or no one will be harmed. But suppose the speed increases to 10 kilometers per hour and it hits the wall. In that case, some passengers may fall and suffer minor injuries. Now imagine that same bus hurling at 200 kilometers per hour, about 125 miles per hour, into the same wall. The consequences would be catastrophic. Now let's apply this to our planet. For Earth, an increase in rotational speed by even half a second is an enormous shift, far more significant than a bus full of people. What is causing this change in Earth's rotational speed? On this point, I agree with specialists who have noted that changes in the core's moment of inertia are what explain the acceleration of Earth's rotation. That is indeed the case. It is changes in the Earth's core that govern the planet's rotational speed. Why am I bringing this up now? Because you must also understand that acceleration and deceleration of Earth's rotation causes physical oscillations within the magma. The inertial speeding up and slowing down of the liquid core leads to additional heat release and increases mantle vibrations. This pulsating magma pressure transmits oscillations to the crust, intensifying its heating and structural weakening. This explains the daily fluctuations in seismic activity. Brief lulls followed by renewed surges in earthquake frequency. Core instability, its oscillations, and the accumulation of energy within the crust all contribute to rising internal tension. Over time, this tension reaches a critical threshold, and then major earthquakes occur. Minor earthquakes barely relieve the system. They fail to dissipate the accumulated energy. The more frequent these cycles of seismic rise and fall become, the more energy builds up in the Earth's crust, and the greater the likelihood of catastrophic events, such as those we witnessed in Turkey and Myanmar. So remember this, even slight changes in Earth's rotational speed trigger a chain reaction within the planet's interior, leading to energy accumulation and, ultimately, to devastating earthquakes. It is precisely for this reason that the March 28th earthquake in Myanmar occurred during a transitional phase in Earth's daily rotational speed. The ongoing rise in anomalous seismic activity on Earth is also due to the fact that no controlled degassing of the Siberian magma plume has yet been carried out. For those who may have missed my earlier addresses, let me once again explain what this is. The Siberian magma plume is a powerful stream of superheated magma rising from deep within the Earth toward the crust. At present, this plume is actively ascending in the very region where, just 250 million years ago, a massive eruption of the Siberian traps took place, an event that triggered the Great Permian Extinction, one of the most significant extinction events in the planet's history. Preliminary estimates indicate that the area affected by magma flows beneath Siberia may span 2,500 to 3,000 kilometers in diameter, an expanse comparable in size to the Australian continent. At this moment, the magma plume is in a critical stage. It has already begun to uplift the tectonic plate above it, evidenced by increased seismic activity along its margins. This points to the possibility that the magma plume could breach the surface at any time. For more detailed information, I encourage you to consult the report entitled "On the Threat of a Magma Plume Eruption in Siberia and Strategies for Addressing the Issue," which was also prepared by a team of scientists, experts, and volunteers from ALLATRA. At present, the only viable solution to this global threat is planned degassing, a process of controlled venting and diversion of gas and lava from Earth's interior aimed at reducing the geodynamic stress on the planet's crust. Without planned degassing, the internal pressure within Earth's magmatic system will continue to build, ultimately leading to the catastrophic events I will address at the end of this speech. However, the current surge in seismic activity is clear evidence that the crust is under immense internal pressure, like a balloon with a hardened shell being inflated from within. Degassing, therefore, could not only prevent the disastrous consequences of a potential rupture of the Siberian magma plume itself, but also significantly reduce the number of destructive earthquakes. As internal pressure subsides, the strain on the crust will lessen, and its deformation will decrease. To date, no other organization other than the ALLATRA scientists have proposed alternative methods. And now I would like to remind you of another breakthrough developed by the ALLATRA scientific team, one that has no equivalent in the world and has played a vital role in mitigating natural disasters, both in specific regions and on a global scale. For more than 20 years, ALLATRA's scientific community has been engaged in an in-depth study of climatic and geodynamic changes on Earth, while also seeking practical solutions to avert the catastrophic consequences arising from these changes. During this time, we not only established a scientific foundation, but also demonstrated in practice that such solutions are indeed feasible. One such solution, which can be discussed publicly, and which I have described in detail in one of my previous addresses, is the experimental equipment developed by the interdisciplinary scientific team at ALLATRA. The operation of this equipment over a 10-year period from 2013 to 2023 had a mitigating effect primarily across the territory of Russia and the countries of Eastern Europe. It influenced atmospheric and hydrospheric processes, thereby preventing the intensification of winds, hurricanes, and anomalous precipitation. This equipment could not, in theory, offset seismic and volcanic activity occurring within the Earth's interior. However, in practice, a reduction in the intensity of seismic activity was observed. Throughout the period of the equipment's operation, the number of extreme events in Russia increased significantly more slowly than in other countries. This occurred despite the fact that in Siberia, air temperatures during that same period were rising 2.5 to 3 times faster than the global average, a consequence of the influence exerted by the Siberian magma plume. This experimental equipment was placed at this specific point on the globe, not for reasons of geopolitics or personal preference, but precisely because of the principal geodynamic threat, the Siberian magma plume located on the territory of Russia, which in the event of an eruption could wipe out all of the planet. Given the accelerated warming observed in the Siberian region, the progression of climate-related disasters across Russian territory should have been markedly more severe. However, the facts indicate that over the span of 10 years, all parameters of extreme climate events in Russia were substantially lower than in other regions of the world. An analysis of open statistical data spanning several decades, which you now see on the screen, demonstrates that between 2013 and 2023, the rate of increase in both the intensity and frequency of climate-related disasters in these territories was indeed lower than in the rest of the world. During this same period in time, the world witnessed a continuous upward trend in climate-related disasters. The absence of such growth in climate catastrophes across Russia over the span of 10 years is an apparent paradox. This paradox is explained by the fact that the experimental equipment, developed by a non-public group of ALLATRA scientists, exerted a real and tangible influence in reducing both the rate and severity of climate-related disasters in this region. Naturally, this equipment is not a panacea. It did not eliminate the underlying causes of climatic or geodynamic changes. However, its operation did significantly reduce the intensity and frequency of catastrophic events, effectively dampening dangerous fluctuations in much the same way that dampening systems function in engineering structures. Like a dam holding back water, the equipment contained the growing pressure, preventing it from tipping into a destructive scenario. However, in August 2023, due to the designation of the ALLATRA movement as an undesirable organization within the Russian Federation, the operation of this equipment was forcibly halted. It was dismantled and removed from Russian territory. Shortly thereafter, one of the ALLATRA scientists publicly stated that the main conclusions regarding the catastrophic trends in the countries formerly within the operational range of the experimental equipment would become apparent within 3 to 4 months. Meanwhile, the full trajectory of disaster dynamics would manifest within 6 to 9 months once the mitigating effects of the equipment's operation had dissipated entirely. As a result, a record surge in both the number and severity of climate-related disasters was duly recorded across Russia and parts of Eastern Europe from August 10th through November 2023. This trend has only intensified with each passing month. Following the equipment's deactivation, climate-related disasters in Russia began occurring in a cascading pattern, striking one after another in rapid succession, with each subsequent event surpassing the last in magnitude. For instance, the following graph analyzes the impact of the equipment's shutdown on the number of storm events across Russia in the 6 months that followed. The blue bars indicate the data for specific months in 2022, while the red bars reflect the corresponding months in 2023. A marked increase in storm activity was observed beginning in October 2023, and this trend has continued into the subsequent months. The next graph illustrates that during the period when the equipment was operational prior to August 10, 2023, as shown by the blue bar, the number of storm events recorded in the Russian Federation was significantly lower than during the equivalent period following the shutdown of the equipment represented by the red bar. During the same 6-month period, monitoring data showed a significant increase in the frequency and intensity of hazardous weather events across the territory of Russia compared to the corresponding periods of previous years. Here again, the blue bars represent 2022, while the red bars represent 2023. This trend is consistent with the information publicly presented on September 3, 2023, by a representative of the ALLATRA scientific team, and confirms that the aforementioned equipment played a significant role in safeguarding human life. To assess the positive effect of the experimental equipment, one can refer to a comparative analysis of losses from climate-related disasters over the past 10 years. According to National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration data, during that period, total financial losses in the United States amounted to $1,153 billion. In Russia, losses from natural disasters over the same time frame totaled $2,109 million. Thus, the disaster mitigation equipment saved Russia at least $1,150 billion. Comparable savings were also observed in Eastern European countries. However, following the shutdown of the ALLATRA equipment, Russia has seen a marked upward trend in economic losses caused by natural disasters. For example, a single event in November 2023 on the Black Sea coast, designated as the storm of the century, resulted in material damage totaling 42 billion rubles. This amount exceeded the total material losses from natural disasters for the entire year of 2022, which amounted to just over 7 billion rubles, according to data from the Ministry of Emergency Situations. And in the following graph, you can see a comparison between the total damages sustained over the 10 years during which the equipment was operational and the damages incurred in just 1 year after the equipment was shut down. An analysis of the data reveals that the only 6 large-scale weather anomalies that occurred after the experimental equipment was deactivated inflicted greater total damage on Russia than the country had suffered from natural disasters in any single year since 2012. According to a report released by Roshydromet, the number of hazardous weather events across all regions of the country increased by an average of 35% in 2023. A total of 448 weather events had serious consequences for the economy and the population, an increase of 34% compared to 2022. In 2023, the annual number of individual climate disasters rose sharply relative to 2022. Hail occurrences increased by 123%. Episodes of anomalously cold weather and severe frost by 73%. Heavy precipitation by 49%. Frost by 36%, and strong winds by 22%. According to Roshydromet specialist, 2024 was an anomalous year in Russia in terms of the number of hazardous hydrometeorological events. However, it is more important to note that these assessments are significantly understated, which is clearly evident from the volume of even the fragmentary data published in the media. Notably, Roshydromet data indicate that 55% of all hazardous hydrometeorological events in 2024 were recorded in the Siberian, Far Eastern, and Southern federal districts. Official sources describe the climate anomalies of 2025 as follows, and I quote, "A crazy April in central Russia turned out to be unique," end quote, stated Roman Vilpand, scientific director of the Hydrometeorological Center. Unique, extremely unique April, because the weather swung from one extreme to another, he said. However, it is important to note that Russia remains a country with a high degree of information control, including with regard to natural disasters. After the shutdown of the experimental equipment, a sharp and predictable surge in climate anomalies followed, making it immediately apparent just how many budgetary funds and resources had actually been saved thanks to the equipment's operation. Not long thereafter, certain circles within the government imposed strict censorship. Today, people are persecuted even for simply discussing abrupt weather changes on social media. This information vacuum is being manufactured deliberately. Have natural events become less frequent? Not at all. Many of them are no longer officially reported, and information about past disasters is being erased. Official channels remain deathly silent, even as the situation grows increasingly alarming. The problems caused by natural disasters have not gone away at all. Local residents continue to observe the changes and share their findings in comment sections. People are not staying silent. Despite the pressure, they persist in speaking out about what is truly happening in their regions. However, official sources no longer provide reliable data. Certain power circles are carefully maintaining the illusion of stability in order to prevent mass migration from Siberia. Their objective is simple: to keep people in place to protect financial and political interest, even if doing so places lives in genuine danger. Meanwhile, they are quietly relocating their own assets out of the Siberian Federal District. This is the highest form of cynicism, which I have addressed in one of my previous videos. In the same regard, I would now like to clarify something I have not previously emphasized, but which I now believe must be said. The fact that the Siberian plume, the largest active magma zone on the planet, has not yet erupted is, to a significant extent and degree, due to the operation of that very equipment. If this system had not been functioning, it is actually uncertain whether or not we would even be able to discuss these developments today, or frankly, whether there would be anyone left to discuss them or listen to them at all. This equipment not only mitigated risk for Russia, but also helped minimize damage on a global scale. And most importantly, it granted humanity, each of us, the most precious resource of all: time. Time to address the threat of the Siberian plume through a strategy of planned degassing. Now that you have a clearer understanding of the scientific and practical value this equipment holds for all of humanity, it becomes easier to grasp why, in my previous address, I stated that there is a person to whom we already owe the very fact that we still have time. For it was he who became the source of the key idea, without which the realization of this equipment project would have been impossible. He identified the cause of the excessive heating over Russian territory, the Siberian magma plume, and also proposed a solution in the form of controlled, planned degassing. This same individual also offered a foundational scientific and technical concept that made it possible to create a system capable of exerting a restraining influence on a number of dangerous geophysical and climatic processes. I am speaking, of course, about my dear colleague, Igor Danilov. His contribution to this project is decisive. It was he who set the scientific direction that would later guide our international team of experts from multiple disciplines, that is to say, geologists, geophysicists, climatologists, medical scientists, chemists, physicists, and engineers across various fields. It must be emphasized that such a scientific breakthrough required truly exceptional intellectual capabilities. Mr. Danilov possesses a rare combination of systems thinking, extensive and interdisciplinary knowledge in the fields of physics and energy, the ability to integrate heterogeneous scientific data, and the intuitive engineering sense that enables him to anticipate the actual mechanisms of interaction within complex systems. His comprehensive understanding of the fundamental laws of nature, particularly the structure and dynamics of electrical processes within the Earth system, made it possible to approach the problem from a fundamentally new perspective, one that transcends the limitations of traditional models. It was Mr. Igor Danilov's profound insight into the nature of electrical interactions across both micro and macro structures that enabled us to develop a unique piece of equipment based on entirely new physical principles. Thanks to his foundational scientific approach, it became possible to create and sustain the long-term operation of a system that, for a full decade, effectively constrained the activity of the Siberian plume. This was not merely a technological experiment, but a precisely calibrated influence on an extremely sensitive geophysical system, an endeavor requiring exceptional accuracy and a deep understanding of the fundamental physical processes governing Earth's geodynamics. It can be clearly stated with a high degree of certainty that had this equipment not been operational, we might not now be facing an entirely different and significantly more catastrophic phase in the progression of climatic and geodynamic processes. And I must clearly emphasize for you, the likelihood of such a scenario was and remains substantial. That is why I consider it both appropriate and scientifically justified to affirm that Mr. Danilov's contribution is truly monumental. His idea, brought to life through the efforts of an international research team, became the very factor that, over the course of a decade, made it possible to restrain destructive processes on a planetary scale. Each of us may very well be alive today because this work was undertaken. It was this scientific concept, translated into practical application, that created the window of time during which humanity still had and still has a chance to take thoughtful and responsible action, to carry out the process of controlled degassing of the Siberian plume. And yet, what do we have today? The equipment that proved effective in stabilizing climatic and geophysical processes has been shut down. Controlled degassing of the Earth's interior has still not been initiated. Scientists in Russia remain under strict surveillance by the Federal Security Service, FSB, which precludes any possibility of international collaboration. Mr. Danilov, the man whose scientific idea gave the world a chance to mitigate catastrophic processes, is now the target of a systematic discrediting campaign. Those who attempt to raise this issue in public or academic forums face repressive pressure. Meanwhile, scientific forecasts regarding the progression of cataclysms grow increasingly alarming, and those who are truly capable of changing the course of events are simply not allowed to act. Please ask yourselves, who bears responsibility for the dire state of today's situation? All of this is the result of deliberate decisions. Specific power circles in Russia made a strategic choice to prevent any public discussion of the Siberian plume. It is not in their interest for scientific data about the plume to receive widespread attention, because acknowledging the threat would require urgent action, including evacuation measures, restrictions on industrial activity, and most painfully for them, severe personal financial losses. So instead of addressing the problem, they activated a familiar and convenient tool of manipulation, the pseudo-scientific anti-cult structure, led by Alexander Dworkin. I have previously spoken about Dworkin's organization. This Russian totalitarian extremist cult operates as a hired mercenary, serving the interest of someone else's wallet. In this case, their agenda directly contradicts the interest of every global citizen and the future of all humanity. It was Dworkin's network of agents that became the operational mechanism for discrediting everything associated with the ALLATRA movement, and in particular, the name of Igor Danilov. Dworkin's agents, both in Russia and abroad, including Ukraine, such as Irina Krimenovska, a Ukrainian agent of the Russian Racers network, launched a campaign of lies against ALLATRA. Targeted dehumanization and the implementation of a distorted narrative that replaces reality became the key tools of this operation to overwrite ALLATRA's image in the public information space. As a result, a massive informational deepfake was created, a vivid but entirely false picture that overshadowed the actual scientific achievements of the international team of ALLATRA scientists and volunteers working in the interest of global safety and stability. Had Dworkin's cult not subjected the ALLATRA movement to relentless attacks and stigmatization, and had responsible officials paid attention to the confidential section of ALLATRA's 2014 climate report, which laid out in detail the dangers posed by the Siberian plume and the urgent need for action, then controlled degassing could have been initiated at least 5 years ago. This would have provided a real chance to prevent a number of seismic catastrophes, including the devastating earthquakes in Turkey and Myanmar, and to stabilize geodynamic processes. It would have saved hundreds of thousands of lives lost beneath the rubble of these past 5 years. Instead, the short-term gain was prioritized. 5 years of unchecked profit from Siberia for a select circle within Russia's ruling class were deemed more valuable than the safety of millions of their own citizens and the entire global community. If not for the interference of anti-cult activists, Dworkin's international network, the problem of escalating natural disasters could already have been resolved. Instead, the situation continues to deteriorate rapidly. Because of them, no global measures are currently being taken to confront these colossal threats. In essence, without the discrediting campaigns launched by Dworkin, not a single person on this planet would today be facing such a dire and genuinely life-threatening reality. In light of this, it becomes unequivocally clear the extremist activities of anti-cult structures, such as Dworkin's organizations, including Racers, and anti-cult operations in general, which suppress citizens' rights and freedoms, must be banned at the legislative level. At their core, these organizations are anti-human cults. Behind their public rhetoric of fighting cults lies an anti-scientific, anti-human agenda that deploys lies and defamation in service of those willing to sacrifice human lives for personal gain. Their actions must become the subject not only of public reckoning, but also international judicial response. In light of the unprecedented discrediting campaign waged against Mr. Igor Danilov, a man who has made a significant contribution to the development of scientific and technological solutions aimed at preserving life and planetary stability, I consider it both necessary and my direct responsibility to present an objective and well-reasoned account of the essence of his scientific achievements. I also feel compelled to explain why his work holds fundamental significance, not only within individual disciplines, but also for the future of all humanity. Thus, I would like to return to some of the discoveries made possible through the exceptional contribution of Mr. Danilov. As far back as 20 years ago, he drew the attention of the International Research Group to the phenomenon that was severely underestimated at the time, and which, second only to the threat of the Siberian plume, has now become one of humanity's most pressing global problems: the role of micro and nanoplastics in ocean warming. Even then, he clearly pointed out that a single nanoparticle of plastic in the ocean can alter the behavior of millions of surrounding water molecules, reducing their heat capacity and thereby accelerating ocean warming. This destructive aspect of plastic is explored in great detail in a film created by ALLATRA volunteers titled Anthropogenic Factor in the Ocean's Demise, which is available for public viewing online. The second key aspect of plastic's harmful influence, also identified early on by Mr. Danilov, is the devastating effect of nanoplastic particles on human health, including physiological, cognitive, and reproductive functions. Mr. Danilov attributed this to the electrostatic properties of nanoplastics. Once inside the human body, they accumulate and retain an electrostatic charge, which then disrupts the body's finely tuned regulatory processes by penetrating cells, ultimately leading to various severe diseases. And while 20 years ago, these were rigorously developed theoretical forecasts based on analytical calculations, today a body of international research has accumulated that confirms his conclusions regarding the electrostatic properties of nanoplastics and their effects on the human body. Back then, to vividly demonstrate this fundamental property of plastic, Mr. Danilov introduced a simple yet illustrative experiment, one that can easily be replicated at home. Now, on the screen, you see 3 plastic cups on a table. Suspended inside each cup by a thread is a different object: a metal needle, copper wire, and a wooden matchstick. Nearby is a neodymium magnet. Next, a series of tests is conducted using various materials. The first item is a plastic straw. Without any prior treatment, it is brought close to each of the cups. No reaction occurs. The suspended objects remain motionless. Then the plastic straw is briefly placed on the neodymium magnet and once again brought near the cups. Still, no changes in the object's behavior are observed. After that, the plastic straw is vigorously rubbed against a woolen thread and moved near the cups. All 3 objects, the needle, the wire, and the matchstick, begin to oscillate and are drawn toward the straw. The second item tested is a wooden stick. The same sequence of actions is performed. In this case, even after being rubbed with wool, it elicits no reaction from any of the suspended objects. The third item is a metal tube. Whether untreated or rubbed with wool, it causes no reaction in the cups. However, after being placed on the magnet for a short period of time, the metal tube is brought near the objects. And this time the needle responds while the other items remain stationary. The fourth item is a neodymium magnet itself. As shown, only the needle is affected. The other objects remain inert. Thus, through this simple experiment, you can clearly observe that plastic, while being a non-magnetic material and a dielectric, is capable of accumulating a static electric charge through friction, which then allows it to attract lightweight objects via electrostatic interaction with their fields. This is a well-known physical property. Most polymers are found at the lower end of the triboelectric series, meaning they tend to accept electrons and have a heightened ability to accumulate electrostatic charge compared to other materials. In fact, this experiment has revealed substantially more extensive implications than those I have presently outlined. But that is not the focus of today's discussion. So let us concentrate on the properties of plastic instead. What Mr. Danilov drew our attention to at the time is even more critical. The same capacity to retain electrostatic charge persists at the nanoscale. He emphasized that nanoplastic particles, once inside cells, retain localized electrostatic charges, which leads, figuratively speaking, to an energetic overload of the cell. The charges that would otherwise be naturally discharged remain trapped due to the presence of nanoplastic. To conceptualize this concept more vividly, he used the following metaphor. Household appliances, like a television, refrigerator, or microwave, are designed to operate at 110 or 220 volts. Feed them 600 volts and the system will fail. This, in simplified terms, is the kind of damage nanoplastic inflicts on a cell. It introduces excessive voltage, disrupting the cell's internal functions. And at the cellular level, this means that the localized charges retained by plastic nanoparticles interfere with the cell's finely tuned bioelectrical processes. As confirmed by modern research, such charges can distort membrane potential, disrupt signal transmission, and impair the normal functioning of ion channels. As a result, cells lose the ability to transmit signals properly. The immune system becomes dysregulated and mechanisms of cell division break down. This can lead to chronic inflammation, accelerated aging, and hormonal imbalances. When nanoplastic penetrates the brain, its electrostatic properties interfere with neural activity, leading to cognitive disorders, memory loss, reduced concentration, and the development of dementia. The greatest danger, however, lies in the fact that localized charges retained by nanoparticles can damage DNA. When affected cells divide, they pass on already compromised genetic information. This increases the risk of mutations and gives rise to heritable genetic distortions. As a result, severe diseases can develop, including congenital pathologies that may manifest as early as the prenatal stage. Due to the influence of nanoplastics, future generations are highly likely to be born with genetic abnormalities that result in severe immune dysfunction and systematic illnesses that are passed down through successive generations. This involves not only a rise in hereditary diseases and neurological disorders, but also a gradual degradation of humanity's reproductive functions as such. I have already addressed this in one of my previous speeches. These trends are already being documented. An increase in congenital neurodevelopment disorders, including autism spectrum disorders, a growing frequency of cognitive deficits in newborns, rising cases of both male and female infertility, and a higher incidence of fetal genetic anomalies and other complications. All of this was foretold by Mr. Danilov 20 years ago. A number of studies have also noted another property of nanoplastic that Mr. Danilov had previously highlighted years ago as well. Its ability, due to its specific electrostatic characteristics, to prolong the lifespan of viruses. Recent research confirms this finding. Viruses remain active on plastic surfaces for 3 to 7 days, which is significantly longer than on most other materials. This means that plastic nanoparticles, once inside the body, can serve as a platform for the extended survival of viruses within the organism. In addition, the risk of infection increases. The virus is given more time and more opportunities to penetrate cells, thereby substantially raising the likelihood of infection. Modern studies are only just beginning to grasp how dangerous the electrostatic influence of nanoplastic can be on cells and ions within the human body. This field remains in the early stages of investigation. Yet this is precisely what Mr. Danilov warned us about 20 years ago, alerting us to risk that science is only now beginning to understand. It is important to emphasize that Mr. Danilov not only identified the problem of nanoplastics, but also proposed solutions. Regarding nanoplastics in the ocean, which, as I've already described, contribute to extreme ocean warming, he suggested a method of water purification using atmospheric water generators, or AWGs. The application of this technology on a global scale would accelerate oceanic evaporation, which in turn would facilitate the removal of nanoplastic from the water, cool the ocean itself, and consequently cool the lithospheric plates beneath it. However, he noted that the AWG solution would not be as effective in the context of nanoplastics' effects on the human body. Increased ocean evaporation would inevitably lead to a higher concentration of nanoplastic in the air we breathe. As a result, the level of nanoplastic in the human body would rise, negatively impacting the health of every person on Earth. Thus, one could say that AWGs, on the one hand, offer a real opportunity to cool the ocean and halt planetary overheating. And as of now, no other practical solution has been proposed. However, on the other hand, by applying this methodology, which represents a lifeline for the ocean, we will encounter a new challenge, the more intensive infiltration of nanoplastic into the human body. Yet, as Mr. Danilov emphasized, the solution to the problem of nanoplastics' impact on human organism must lie in an entirely different domain. In altering its electrostatic properties. Given the fact that nanoplastic cannot be removed from cells or from the brain, the task becomes, in simplified terms, to strip nanoplastic of its ability to accumulate a pathogenic electrostatic charge. As Mr. Danilov noted, this is a problem that demands a comprehensive approach, one that spans multiple scientific disciplines: physics, chemistry, biology, and engineering. Nevertheless, he stressed that the task is entirely feasible and, if successfully addressed, the harm caused by nanoplastics to the human body could be reduced by at least 50%. The physiological and chemical consequences of nanoplastic would remain. Still, its electrostatic influence, which causes the most significant damage, could be neutralized. and that, in turn, would grant us additional time to develop solutions for its removal from the body. It is worth noting that Mr. Danilov always emphasized that while the issue of nanoplastics is significant in hierarchy of global threats to humanity, it remains secondary. At the top of that hierarchy stands the fundamental problem of the Siberian plume, a phenomenon that critically influences Earth's climatic and geological processes. That is why the first solution to be implemented in practice was special experimental equipment I spoke about earlier. It was designed as a means to buy time, to slow the pace of catastrophic disasters and significantly alleviate the planet's climatic and geodynamic instability. Now I would like to point out the key physical principle upon which the operation of this device is based. To illustrate it, we will demonstrate a simple experiment that anyone can replicate: a plastic cup with a needle suspended on a thread inside and a magnet nearby. As expected, the magnet attracts the needle. However, if one takes a plastic straw, charges it through friction with wool, and then moves it near the cup, one can observe the needle begin to oscillate noticeably. You can see how, despite the dominant magnetic field, a weak electrostatic field can still influence the needle's behavior. I am confident that many of you already possess a sufficient level of education which will allow you to fully comprehend the basic physical explanation for this phenomenon. However, I am equally certain that what will elude most observers is that this experiment demonstrates a specific, deeper principle of interaction. Perhaps only a handful of scientists worldwide, outside of our ALLATRA research community, will be able to perceive and understand the whole essence of the principle revealed here. I hope such scientists still exist. And I will go even further. It is precisely this principle, one that most will overlook in this experiment, but which Mr. Danilov brought to our esteemed attention, that underpins the operation of the very equipment that, over the course of 10 years, stabilized climatic and geological processes across the territory of Russia, and thereby helped mitigate the climate situation for the entire world. The diversity of fields in which Mr. Danilov's ideas have been implemented may naturally spark interest. Yet in his case, this is entirely understandable. Mr. Danilov is a professional for whom an interdisciplinary approach to scientific and technical challenges has become not just a working method, but an organic and natural mode of expansive thinking. As such, scientific and technological solutions, such as controlled degassing technology, or the development of specialized equipment for mitigating climate disasters, should not be viewed as the product of chance. On the contrary, they are the logical outcome of Mr. Danilov's unique foundational approach. His decades of research and his extraordinary ability to integrate knowledge across scientific domains and professional competencies. Mr. Danilov has consistently developed and refined this approach within his medical specialization, where, drawing a systemic and multidisciplinary vision, he has created a number of proprietary treatment methods that have demonstrated high effectiveness in addressing clinically complex conditions. To illustrate this, I would like to present two compelling examples of his research and applied work in the field of medicine. These examples reveal the extraordinary potential of the human mind when it is guided by interdisciplinary thinking and a sincere motivation to serve the greater good. One of the fields in which Mr. Danilov has worked consistently for many years concerns a fundamental challenge that remains exceedingly complex in biomedicine: the possibility of restoring and regenerating human tissue, including tissues traditionally regarded as incapable of self-repair, such as intervertebral disc. Today, millions of people around the world suffer from spinal disorders linked to degenerative changes in intervertebral disc. As a result of aging, excessive physical strain, including athletes, or prolonged sedentary lifestyles, the structural integrity of these discs gradually deteriorates. This leads to widespread conditions such as osteochondrosis and other forms of degenerative dystrophic disorders. These conditions severely affect quality of life and are often accompanied by chronic pain and restricted mobility, and in many cases lead to disability. The desire to find an effective, scientifically grounded solution to this problem and alleviate human suffering became the central motivation behind Mr. Danilov's research and clinical work in this area. Mr. Danilov's principal objective was to restore the regenerative potential of the intervertebral disc, including its nucleus pulposus, which for a long time had been considered irreparable. The result of his years of research in the physiology and biomechanics of the spine was a patented method he named vertebrorevitology. Vertebrorevitology is a non-invasive approach to treating degenerative dystrophic diseases of the spine, which through manual correction creates the conditions necessary for the complete restoration of a degenerating intervertebral disc. In other words, this is a method that allows patients to avoid surgery and restore spinal function without any surgical intervention. The application of this method effectively enables full restitution of the invertible disc, a result that had previously been considered impossible. It was long believed that intervertebral discs were incapable of regeneration. However, by developing the patented vertebrorevitology method, Mr. Danilov disproved that assertion in practice, demonstrating that the intervertebral disc can regenerate, provided the right conditions are created. To date, this is the only known methodology that has shown objectively verified restoration of both the structure and function of the intervertebral disc. The vertebrorevitology method has demonstrated high clinical efficacy. These outcomes are supported by objective data, including a series of MRI scans taken before and after treatment. Across numerous images showing the patient's spine before and after the procedure, one can clearly see how intervertebral discs that were nearly absent are restored following the application of the method, how herniations disappear, and how the human spine, in essence, is given new life. What are the principles underlying this method? As Mr. Danilov himself explains in his book, Osteochondrosis for the Professional Patient, the physical and mathematical calculations he conducted showed that in order to trigger a full reparative response in the tissue of a degenerating disc, it is necessary to create conditions in which the mechanical load on the disc is reduced by approximately 37%, while simultaneously maintaining the parameters required for stable intratissue osmosis and microcirculation. However, achieving such unloading within Earth's gravitational field by natural means proved to be practically impossible. On this basis, Mr. Danilov developed his original method of vertebrorevitology, a manual technique of correcting spinal column biomechanics aimed at localized optimization of load distribution and restoration of the spatial positioning of vertebral segments. It is precisely this form of artificial unloading, combined with the creation of favorable physiological conditions, that enables the activation of reparative activity in the remaining disc cells, even under conditions of advanced degenerative dystrophic pathology. In this sense, the method developed by Mr. Danilov represents a genuine revolution in medicine because what he has achieved amounts to precision biomechanical engineering that makes it possible to create conditions for intervertebral disc restoration. Yet, herein lies the principal challenge. The method demands virtuoso-level mastery of anatomy, physics, and clinical reasoning. It is not merely a manual technique. It is high-precision engineering applied to living tissue, where an error of just a few millimeters or a few newtons of force can nullify the intended effect. Given the method's complexity, transmitting this unique body of innovative knowledge, a synthesis of medicine, biomechanics, and physics has also become a significant difficulty. The second example of this individual scientific work opens fundamentally new horizons in the study of regeneration and biological rejuvenation. By understanding the nature of physical processes at the micro level, Mr. Danilov developed a pharmaceutical compound aimed at extending life beyond the species-specific limit. It was first tested on laboratory mice. The results exceeded expectations. In elderly specimens at the final stage of their life cycle, restoration of physiological functions was truly observed. Within 3 months, the control group exited the experiment due to natural death from aging, as anticipated. Meanwhile, the experimental group began to exhibit signs of rejuvenation. The animals became active, regained reproductive function, and maintained vitality, continuing to reproduce. With regular administration of the compound once every 3 months, the mice remained biologically young and clinically healthy, showing no signs of aging. They lived for more than 10 years, whereas the average lifespan of a mouse is 2 to 3 years. That is nearly 4 full lifespans, equivalent to roughly 400 years in human terms. After the compound was discontinued, no accelerated aging was observed. The animals lived out their natural lifespan. Similar results were recorded in rabbits. Throughout observation, no pathologies were detected, allowing researchers to hypothesize that the compound's effects could be cyclic and potentially unlimited. Unfortunately, the experiment had to be terminated due to external circumstances. While from the standpoint of academic science, a discontinued experiment cannot be considered thoroughly verified, it nonetheless served as a critical demonstration of the possibility of exceeding the species-specific limits of lifespan. In concluding the discussion on Mr. Danilov's groundbreaking scientific contributions, it is important to note that in 2019, he made the decision to suspend his medical practice. By that time, it had become increasingly evident that the climate situation was approaching a critical threshold. He understood that his involvement was now more urgently needed in this domain, because the matter concerns the safety of the entire planet. This was not merely a personal choice. It was a step dictated by a deep sense of responsibility to the light of this escalating threat posed by the Siberian plume. Over the years of applying his vertebral revivitology method in practice, Mr. Danilov healed and restored thousands of patients. Although he was physically based in Ukraine, people traveled from around the world to receive his care. Through his work, he brought international recognition to Ukraine. His unique treatment method and the results it delivered attracted media attention. Articles and television segments were produced documenting his remarkable outcomes. And yet, consider this, all of that well-earned reputation, built through years of dedication and service to others, was destroyed the moment he publicly stood in defense of humanity by shedding light on the threat of the Siberian plume and the exponential escalation of climate and geodynamic changes. In response to his efforts to identify the danger posed by the Siberian plume and to call for urgent action, certain Russian power circles launched a campaign to discredit him. Rather than embracing Mr. Danilov's groundbreaking developments, they publicly slandered and dehumanized him. His image was deliberately distorted by agents of Dvorkin's totalitarian extremist organization into something utterly absurd, bearing no relation whatsoever to reality. Igor Danilov is a man who has always acted and continues to act solely in the interest of society, never placing personal gain above the common good. Moreover, he consciously sacrificed his own reputation in order to bring to light information that could save lives and alter the course of events on a global scale. Inspired by his example, we in the scientific community have always operated under the principle that human lives, the life of each one of you, are far more important than our reputations. It is absolutely clear that, for him, the preservation of life on this planet and of humanity itself far outweighs the value of his personal name or status. Now, as you encounter various interpretations of Mr. Danilov's work in the information space, it is essential to ask yourself, what do you truly know about the gentleman? The truth, or the fabricated narrative crafted by the cultist Dvorkin, an individual with documented psychiatric disorders and a loyal servant of the Russian repressive anti-human apparatus. I have already explained the motivations behind Dvorkin's actions and those of his handlers. I will not dwell on them again. Now that you have the whole picture, you are capable of discerning truth from falsehood, of understanding who truly defends the interest of all people and who merely serves the agendas of certain power groups that profit by sacrificing the very lives of the people they exploit. Given all the facts laid out above, it is now evident that due to the actions of Dvorkin and his network to discredit ALLATRA and its participants, projections of geodynamic activity are only worsening. The longer the current situation persists, the more catastrophic its consequences will be. Let us now turn to the forecast of events that will inevitably unfold if the degassing of the Siberian plume is not carried out. Recall the image I previously shared with you. Our little blue sphere coated in a sugar glaze. That sphere is expanding from internal heat. The sugar coating on its surface begins to crack intensely. Even now, we are entering a phase of sustained seismic activity at magnitude 6.0. From here, we face two possible scenarios. In the first scenario, the planet is struck by a series of destructive earthquakes, ranging from magnitude 7 to catastrophic events reaching 8, 9, or even higher. What's more, these will begin to occur in regions traditionally considered seismically safe. Remember this, the most powerful earthquakes happen when and where we least expect them. Now imagine for a moment what would happen if an earthquake with a magnitude of even 7.5 struck Moscow, Beijing, or even Washington, D.C. Moscow, utterly unprepared for seismic activity, would suffer devastating damage. The Stalin-era skyscrapers, the pride of Soviet architecture, would collapse into massive tombstones, crumbling into concrete rubble. The dome of Kremlin's cathedrals would come crashing down onto the cobblestones with a deafening crack. The metro system would become a mass grave for tens of thousands, its collapsed tunnels burying entire trains. Residential districts would turn into ruins. Panel-built 9-story buildings and standard micro-districts from the 1970s and 1980s would collapse, entombing 30 to 40% of their residents beneath the wreckage. Ancient Beijing, despite its earthquake preparedness, was still reel under the weight of a tectonic nightmare. The Forbidden City, the imperial palace with its delicate pagodas, would be reduced to 1,000-year-old ruins. Modern skyscrapers in the CBD business district would tumble like houses of cards, burying tens of thousands of office workers. The historic Zhonghuangsun district, the technological heart of China, would lose hundreds of research laboratories and startups. The residential areas of Chaoyang and Haidian would collapse into heaps of concrete and glass, where hundreds of thousands would perish beneath the rubble. Ruptured gas pipelines would ignite firestorms, incinerating entire city blocks. Washington, the capital of our American democracy, like Moscow, is unprepared for serious seismic activity. Residential neighborhoods would collapse, burying thousands. The dome of the Capitol, the symbol of American statehood, would crack and partially collapse. The White House, though reinforced with armored structures, would also sustain severe damage. The Lincoln and Washington memorials would be reduced to mangled sculptural remnants, and the Pentagon's underground tunnels would become a mass grave for hundreds of military personnel. We'll be spared living through a whole series of devastating global earthquakes in one case. And that is the second scenario. If we are simply wiped out by the eruption of the Siberian plume. It could erupt at any moment, perhaps even before I finish this speech. The pressure there is already sufficient for a fatal rupture to occur. Even if it does not happen immediately, our forecast indicates that once the Earth system crosses the fatal threshold of increasing frequency of magnitude 7 earthquakes, it could trigger an instantaneous magma release from the Siberian magma plume. In such a case, we will no longer be dealing with localized destruction, but with a global catastrophe, comparable to the sudden burst of an overinflated balloon. Pierce it, and it simply burst. This is precisely why a planned degassing conducted during the late stages of the crisis will not stabilize the situation at all. On the contrary, it will provoke disaster. Based on the current escalation of seismic activity, the window of time during which planned degassing can still yield a positive effect is rapidly closing. As I've mentioned today, our critical threshold is the marked increase in the frequency of magnitude 7.0 earthquakes. After that point, any attempt at degassing will likely trigger a plume eruption, and we will lose all ability to control it. The plume is still being held back only by the Earth's tremendous structural resilience, but even that is not infinite. Right now, the pressure deep underground is pulsing, building up, then partially releasing, while the regulatory mechanisms are still functioning. This rhythm is the last sign of the planet's immune response. The situation is truly acute, and that is why it is absolutely imperative to act without delay. This is the critical moment right now, when humanity still has a chance to make the decision to carry out the planned degassing of the Siberian magma plume. If we begin the process in a timely manner and can, as a civilization, endure the critical 20-year phase of the catastrophic cycle, then we will secure at least 250 million years of planetary safety. But if those who bankroll the leader of the totalitarian sect, Dvorkin, continue to conceal this information from the Russian population, continue to ignore the threat of the plume eruption, and continue to sabotage the implementation of planned degassing, then not only Russia, but all of humanity is doomed. As painful as it is to say, if we fail to carry out this degassing, billions of people will perish. Those in power in Russia who chose to conceal information about the plume and launched a discrediting campaign against ALLATRA through Dvorkin's cult ought to ask themselves a serious question. Was it worth it? Vast sums were spent spreading lies about ALLATRA, and after the equipment shutdown, the economic losses alone on a national scale are measured in billions. Meanwhile, The world teeters on the brink of global catastrophe. I ask you, was it worth it, economically or practically? The risks to all of humanity have multiplied exponentially, all for the sake of short-term profit, gained by a narrow circle within the Russian power structure. Yes, partial evacuation would have been necessary. Not all of Siberia, but certain territories. Yes, that would have meant a financial loss, but in return, there would have been a strategic advantage for the entire planet. Instead of taking action, they continue safeguarding their assets and tell the people, stay in Siberia, raise your children, don't listen to him, because in their view, I am a deep fake. Regardless of what they believe I am, the threat I am warning about is genuine and real. To be fair, 5 years ago, the catastrophic nature of the situation was not yet fully apparent to the public. But today, this problem is visible to all, even to those who once remained silent. The core issue is this: decision makers are receiving distorted information. Business interests outweigh any honest assessment of the situation. But what will be left of politics and the economy after a true catastrophe? If events unfold according to our mathematical model, first millions will die in natural disasters, and then billions. Once mass death and chaos begin, it will be too late to act. Catastrophic events lie ahead. And after each one, if you survive, you will gain sobering experience and understand far more than you do today. But that is not the path forward. We must not allow millions to perish simply because we failed to reach those who believed disaster would never touch them. Catastrophe will affect everyone without exception. The experimental equipment that restrained the rise of climate and geodynamic stress for a decade is not a final solution or a panacea, but it granted us something of immeasurable value, and that is time. Today, as we witness daily earthquakes of magnitude 5.0 and a rising frequency of magnitude 6.0 events, we can begin to comprehend the true significance of that delay. Without the operation of that equipment, humanity would most likely have already crossed the threshold of irreversible catastrophe. And you and I might not even be here at all right now. Can you imagine how much time, how much life was given to you freely? And now, please consider, what is the worth of your life? What price could ever measure the fact that you are alive right now and not buried beneath the rubble of fires and earthquakes? What price could capture the value of waking up in the morning, breathing in the aroma of coffee, seeing your reflection in the mirror, and embracing your children and loved ones? You are alive, and you may not even know why. You may not realize to whom and to what you owe your continued existence. You are still alive because, for many years, a system continued to operate, equipment that held back devastating climate and geodynamic processes. And it functioned because its concept, its operating principles, and its engineering design were proposed by Mr. Danilov. And we as a scientific team made it a reality. It was he who gave humanity a chance it might never have had. He gave us time. Time not only to live, but time essential to implement the one solution capable of averting a planetary catastrophe. Now you know who is fighting for your life, and to whom you owe the fact that you and your loved ones are still alive. Humanity has yet to invent a reward great enough to match the immense contribution Mr. Danilov has made to your life, to ensure that you and your children still have a chance to live. And yet, what did he receive in return for his service to humanity? A shattered reputation, discrediting, persecution, harassment. Yes, some of you may not care about what happens or to whom, but you do care about your life. You do care about the chance for you and your children to survive. If you believe your life has value, then do not remain silent. Do not shift responsibility onto politicians, whom you assume are ones who should resolve the planetary threat. As long as you do nothing, they too will do nothing, because they are not different from you. They will not act on what society does not demand. That is why, as long as you remain silent, they too will remain inactive. But today, while we still have a chance, your voice, your action, and your contribution are invaluable. It carries decisive weight. Everything we warned about years ago is happening right this moment. But there is still a chance, not merely to win a few more years, but potentially millions of years of life on this planet. This is not a metaphor, it's a calculation. If we succeed, humanity will gain 250 million years for development, for resolving political and economic challenges, for building the future. But before all of that, first and foremost, for life itself. Right now, we are all living, quite literally, on borrowed time, paid for by someone else's labor, knowledge, and courage. Don't waste it. This is your opportunity to become part of something greater. Because today, what is at stake is life itself, yours, and the lives of all who will come after you. So reflect deeply and answer this one simple question. Is your life worth fighting for?